Today I am joined by Laura Pomponi, founder of Luxury Projects, Giorgio Cassetta, founder of Giorgio Cassetta Design, and Tim Ulrich and Immo Lüdeling, partners at Biederbeck Designs. And today we're going to be tackling the subject of how to design your dream yacht. So we thought we'd go in with the big subject first. And we're going to look at this from both perspectives. We're going to look at this if you're an owner or not yet an owner and you've got a dream yacht and you want to commission your first boat, how can you make that happen? And we're also going to look at it as, from the perspective of a designer. If an owner is coming to you with this grand plan they've had in their head for 5 years, how can you make that reality and how can you deal with the challenges that might come up? So to start with, I'm an owner, I've got an amazing idea in my head. How on earth do I choose a designer from all the hundreds that are out there? Laura, what do you think?
So following my experience, owners reach the designer or select the designer either because they are suggested by a friend, or generally as designer we are introduced by the broker or by the middleman who is close to the client at the moment. And obviously I speak about the interiors since we are interiors specialists, and eventually my colleagues like Giorgio have a different opinion or different contact with the clients since he's designing the exteriors.
So to follow on that, I would say if you have to pick up a designer, I agree with Laura. Actually, most of the time, us as designers are introduced by either a broker or someone from a shipyard, or anyway, someone in the industry who's more in direct touch with clients and has had previous experience with us, so they trust us and kind of know how we work and think that we could fit the client's needs. The other case scenario is when an owner is actually looking to go and talk directly to a designer, which happens. I guess there's two, it's either someone that already knows us, so it's the continuation of our relationship in most cases, or the other option is when owners actually look out on the market for who's the best designer for them. So in that case, to go back to your question, how do you pick one? I think the best thing is to do a bit of a deep research in terms of how do these people work, how do they connect to your way of thinking, what's their expertise, and how do they apply it to the progress of the design work. Because one thing is to look just at the styling, but I think when you're talking about custom boats, especially on exterior design, the styling has very little to say of what the designer is actually able to do, because of course, talking about custom boats, the style of whatever has already been built has to reflect what the owner intended it to be. And we are not artists, we're craftsmen that help the best possible outcome out of an owner's idea or dream or perception sometimes. So the long story short is just investigate on who the designer you're looking at is in terms of capability of building up and following your way of thinking, and maybe talk to people that have already worked with them to get some reference and some insight from people in the industry or other clients.
You do your homework. And
exactly.
Tim and Immo, I know that you have had people kind of come to you out of the blue in the past. What questions will a good studio ask you, and what questions should you be asking them?
One of the most important questions to ask is that learn about the background of the owner. What we always say is that we have to take the owners very, very serious, even if they are not the expert on our field, but normally they are experts in using the yachts, even more than we are. So we try to learn a lot about what yachts did they have before, what is the history in yachting, but also what is the history in their houses, what ideas do they have. Another thing is we have to learn a lot about their personal lives, their lifestyle, to be sure to match with the design their requirements.
So really it's more of a personal experience than you might think. You have to be on the same wavelength and you have to sort of get inside their head a bit. Does that sound right?
it's definitely a very, very personal thing, especially if you are in the, we do exterior design and interior design. Exterior design might be a little bit different because it's not just the exterior design, but also the layout and the use of the boat in total. There are a lot of functions are very important, but when it comes to interior, it's very, very, very personal. You design the spaces where they're living, where they're sleeping, where the owners just live.
Also, we have another perspective to be considered when the yachts are part of a series that is built by the shipyard and is built on speculation. So that's where the shipyard is commissioning you the design of a yacht. And therefore, you know, the mindset totally changes. So before you work for a private client and with his own taste, his own lifestyle, you did maybe projects with him in residential, or you follow up in the next boat. But then you have the option when the shipyard selects you and you have to build a yacht that is not sold yet, so it's built on speculation, and he has to be appealing on the market, so he has to be an old man's friend to make it easier eventually and help the shipyard to sell it. And then is where you have to try as a designer to bring your own style or your own knowledge of the market, and within the constraints that obviously the shipyard maybe will give you.
And you've got an interesting perspective on this because you've worked for shipyards as well, haven't you? How do you marry? You've got, you know, what the owner wants to do, what the designer wants to do, and the shipyard. What's the key to making sure that all works harmoniously and it isn't just a big stressful nightmare?
But really, you know, as a designer, sometimes you feel a little bit a magician to find the chemistry to make all the process go on, because you don't have just the owner wife, you have the owner rep, you have the captain, you have the chief stewardess. Along the process, you have the financial advisor, the lawyer, and then you have the shipyard side. So when you have the project manager and the interior specialist of the shipyard, the joinery company. So put all the dream together is really a job of really understanding the chemistry and make the dream for the client, but let's say following the construction rules, the budget, avoiding extra expenses or going out of budget allowances given to the shipyard, because then you have a change order that means an extra money paid by the client comes to be upset. So it's really, I think, all both Giorgio, Immo, and Tim has the same experience. So we try to build the dream and make everybody happy.
You described perfectly why our profession is so challenging.
Exactly. It's not really the design itself that is difficult, because it's in our blood, whatever style we are following, or with our preference, so we follow the client. The real issue is to make all these people work together. And I had an experience with a project, and I had around the owner 10 people of different nationalities.
Gosh.
So it's difficult, but it's challenging.
We have a saying in our office: it's the technical things we will get solved.
It's the politics that can be the headache, right? What are some of the sorry, Giorgio, go ahead.
No worries. That's what I like to say. It's what needs to happen is a blend of cultures where maybe you have to step back a little bit with your design ego, and someone from shipyard has to step back a little bit. It's hard to get the owner to step back, but you can get them to understand the priorities, and I think that's the key in the end of what Laura was saying. Because sorry, Laura, I switched to English in my head.
No worries.
What I mean is, it's very hard, as Laura was saying, when you have like 15 people on the owner side and 15 people on the shipyard side, plus you as a design team, and everybody's trying to make decisions. That's when the worst happens. So I think one key thing is to limit the number of people who are in authority to decide. Everybody in the team try to understand that this is not to, make some of the team members a little bit less of what they are, but just to keep the project on its timeline, first of all, and on a coherent progress, and merge all the parts together in a way that they coherently fit into something that as a whole is better than the sum of its parts. And that's probably the biggest challenge, and it's a lot of politics, as you were saying.
And let's talk a bit about timescales and shipyards for a second, because I know that one of the things owners sort of fear is that once their boat is in the yard, they've lost control, and the project might be spiraling costs and dollar signs are appearing, and there's nothing they can do to get it back on track. How can they make that relationship work easily and smoothly and in a reasonable time frame?
Well, in my experience, the first and most important, and it really cannot ever be stressed enough, is the amount of information and precision of information you convey to the shipyard before even beginning to discuss the contract, not even starting to build. The more you have, and the more precise what you have is before you start putting down your numbers, your contractual clauses, etc., the better the outcome will be. This doesn't mean that you do not have room for change during the construction, because one of the most wonderful thing of building a yacht is enjoying the construction period. And if I, as an owner, had to convey everything up front and then forget about the boat for 3 years, then probably building a yacht wouldn't be funny at all. But to try to be as clear as possible with what your goals are, your priorities especially, and thus allowing everything that's technical, let's say pre-engineering, to be as precise as possible to fit what you will need, frees up the whole work of so many risk factors that it really becomes an enjoyable experience. Because then you're in the whereabouts, well, where things that can change or change the costs or timing are only things that are trivial, if you want. It's like, a particular decor thing that you didn't think about before. Maybe you want to use a marble that you didn't anticipate you would be using, and it's going to cost X thousand, whatever more. But it's not going to be like your boat needs to grow 5 meters because you didn't think of enough space to allocate to essential functions. And that's where things can really screw up. And funny enough, it happens way more often than one could believe, especially with big custom yachts.
Maybe let's ask the Germans. Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to add, Giorgio was talking about the very important beginning phase of a project. I fully agree. I think same importance is for the end of the project phase, because we are doing prototypes, big prototypes, even if it's a semi-custom, it's in a certain way a prototype. And it's very important to give the yard enough time for the handover, to give the yard enough time for fixing all the open points and repairs that have to be done after the handover. There will be lists with a lot of points, and to leave the boat close to the yard for these points, because you can solve everything everywhere in the world, but it's getting difficult. It is annoying for the owner. It's much better if the yard knows they have a certain time, or the boat goes back to the yard after a period of 6 or 8 weeks using it test-wise, because often the annoying phase is after the handover for the owner. This is something which can be avoided if the yard has a chance to take care of this properly.
So patience is key then. You've just got to wait it out until it really is ready.
Yes, the boat is ready, it looks ready, but in the end, the yard still needs time. And it's often, of course, there was a long building period over years, and now you want to have the boat, it's obviously, but the yard needs the time. Every time. We have never had a project where the yard leaves the yard and everything is fine. It's not possible.
And when people are commissioning their first yacht, what are other kind of common things that they misunderstand, or mistakes they make, or difficulties they have when they're talking to the designer? How can you tell, this is your first boat and you don't really know what you're doing?
No, go ahead. No, please.
I think one thing that you can underestimate when you build a yacht for the first time is that you complexity of a yacht. You have so many systems and so many things on so limited space, where every single item might be a normal standard thing that works also in other cases. But on a yacht, you have all this together, and you have so interferences between the systems, which might cause problems that you don't foresee. And if you come to noise and vibration and having all these different sources which can create noise and vibrations and can create noise and vibrations together, it's really hard to foresee that and that complexity that the yacht has. Often we have the clients compare things to the normal buildings or to their own business, and then you have to explain is everything squeezed together on very limited space, on sea, on different difficult environments. And I think this is one thing that people that are not experienced with that are underestimating.
For sure, clients have their own idea, and as Giorgio was saying, the much more clear their ideas are, is better to, let's say, to start in a very good way the project. It's important that the client trusts the designer, because obviously if he's at the beginning of his love to build this dream boat, he has to follow the expertise we have, because we can foresee some problems in some decision. And most of the time, new client, let's say, coming on building their first yacht, they are influenced by, let's say, a certain kind of lifestyle or a certain trend. I can give an example. You know, now in the residential, we have open kitchen with a chef behind a glass who is cooking, and it's nice to have the, let's say, the salon with the full view through the kitchen. But in a yacht, we have to realize that the kitchen runs 24 hours, and as bigger is the yacht, at least you have 12 to 14 guests, and then all the crew that can be from let's say 10 and then to 50, you know. And so the kitchen works around the clock, and you cannot have this kind of layout because of the smell, because there is no way to make it work properly. So this is where the design comes, and to guide the client to do the right choices in the right moment, and avoiding any changes in the construction. So that's the help with our expertise we do. I think all of us here, we are following the dream of the client. We are not pushing for any style, but we love to inspire the client to do something amazing, which will have our own sign on the project. And I would like to mention what one day John Bannenberg apparently said to a client who wanted to do something really peculiar and not eventually so nice. He said, "Mister, your boat, you will never be always the owner of your boat, but I will still remain the designer of that boat." So,
yes,
so
yeah, your reputation's on the line.
That says a lot.
And I think cruise spaces is an interesting one, because if you're an owner, you're fantasizing about your master cabin or your amazing hot tub. You're not necessarily thinking about where the Hoover should go, or how many stewardesses, where they're going to be able to stay, and that sort of thing. Do owners often neglect that, or are people surprisingly thoughtful from that perspective?
I'll take this because thank you for bringing this up. It kind of makes me think of a couple of things. First of all, I perfectly second what Laura says. Something that people underestimate is that, yes, the boat is going to be there for 3 or 5 years, but our name is going to be there forever. And that's not only a thing of ego, but it's also what personally I consider extremely important, and this goes also to reply to your question now, is that besides looking good or being particularly a wow factor when it's shown in a show, a boat has to work, meaning it has to allow the owner to experience the kind of comfort and service and whatever he expects from that boat throughout its life, throughout the boat's life. And for these crew spaces, crew areas, and service areas such as pantries, galleys, corridors that are wide enough and comfortable, the way the service passages are laid out in a way so that they don't force guests to trip on someone who is going around with dirty laundry or whatever, are absolutely essential. I wouldn't say owners neglect their crew. Over the last 10 years, I think there's been a major shift by most owners looking for custom boats towards a more, let's say, towards more consciousness of how important it is for the crew to live comfortably on board. But what I often find, especially for people that approach a custom build for the first time, is that first of all, they generally expect boats to be way more spacious than they actually are. Mm. People that come wishing to buy a 50 or a 60 or even a bigger boat, they generally have the attitude, which is entirely comprehensible. It's like, I'm buying a 60 meter, everything's gonna fit on it easily. You will find out to a lot of
never big enough.
A lot of surprise, not necessarily a positive surprise, that it's actually not at all like that. And even when you're designing a 100 meter boat and a 5,000 GRT one, you will for sure find things that don't fit, and you will end up wanting to build an even bigger one, which is good for us, let me be honest. But so first of all, they generally underestimate the space. And second, they tend to underestimate the space that's needed for technical stuff. And I'm not talking about engine rooms, I'm talking even cabinets for fan coils, or as you were saying, where to put a hoover or a cleaning cupboard or stuff like that. The problem is you can easily compress guest space and make it look beautiful. That's the interior designer's work, but you can make it work. But service spaces and technical spaces can be compressed up to a point. So it's very important, in my opinion, that the designer is extremely honest. And it's really a matter of honesty towards the client in making them understand that there's things that cannot be reduced or can be reduced, but up to a point. It's like a dishwasher is what it is. You cannot make a dishwasher smaller. And you know, and if you serve dinner for 48 people, you will have to have a counter where 48 or 96 dirty plates or dishes can find their own space before getting washed. I will cut it here, but I think I kind of conveyed. I don't know if you agree with this, Immo and Laura and Tim.
Yeah, as you said, the problem is that it's sometimes difficult to convince the client that reducing their own cabin or let's say guest area of 5 centimeters that it will never not show when they will be on board, but on the drawings their perception is that is a lot of reduction. So is some kind of a point to make them understand that the space for the crew and the technical space, the right access to the technical space, as Giorgio said, is how we can make the boat work well, the yacht work well, helping the crew to serve the client in the proper way and not losing time to dismount panels or having the proper space to let's say to prepare a coffee, to settle a tray with all the stuff they need to bring to properly serve them. So is there where functionalities follows forms. I mean, and then they come on board when the boat is finished. Said, you know, you're really right. There is no perception that we lost these 5 to 10 centimeter, and everybody is happy. I always feel that sometimes some client, maybe because I'm a woman, I feel like it's a marriage. So we have ups and downs, but the honesty, as Giorgio said, the honesty of the designer to foresee the problem and to share with the client in the right time what's the need is tough, but then it brings it to a great success on the trust of the client at the end of the project.
And Tim and Immo, because I can see there's a problem as a designer. You've got these ideas and your client's got these other ideas, and you're trying to help them understand. Are there any kind of tricks or things that you've learned in the years that you've been doing this that can help a client come around to your point of view? You know, I can imagine if you're a young designer and you've got your first big client, it's a nightmare scenario that you're not on the same page. How can you help them speak yacht language?
I would say don't underestimate our clients. Most of them, or all of them, are quite successful in the normal world. They're quite successful in what they're doing, and our experience is our clients know quite well what is possible and what is not possible, and they don't come and have no clue. They have seen boats, they have made up their mind. Normally they come, they have an idea what it costs, what fits in. It's even if it's their first boat, it's quite good for somebody stepping out of somewhere, and that's what they are used to. They are used to learn quick. They're used to get into new themes. Yeah, and that's what we feel always when we talk with clients. You know why they are so wealthy and why so successful. You see it immediately when you talk to them.
Like, they always know how to push a project or something to the board of what is possible, which is always for us a very big challenge. If you're an expert and you know where the problems are, as Giorgio was saying, it's easy to squeeze out 5 centimeters here and something there and give a little bit more space to the technical side. But on the other hand, we feel that if you you always have to balance it between the technical and the wishes of the owner, because it's always a possibility also to squeeze a little bit more on the other side and maybe gain something. And it's a kind of balance you have to create, and the owners normally try to push in the one directions, and often we are surprised how much you can gain, how much you can push without making the yacht worse, sometimes or quite often making the yacht even better.
And this is quite a comprehensive guide to kind of building your dream yacht. Before you do that, how many boats do you need to have been on? If I've chartered twice and now I think I know what I need, is that really enough? Or what would you advise people before they actually take the plunge and commit to a project?
For sure, chartering once is not enough. And for sure, it's important to charter a yacht in different sides of the world to understand when you are going to build your dream yacht, how you want to use it, how you want to travel. You want to travel to the Arctic, so you need a world range yacht, or you just remain in the Mediterranean. You want to go just from your villa to Saint-Tropez in the Côte d'Azur, so you need a very fast, easygoing boat. Or so chartering in different locations of the world is a way to understand. Even if you will use the boat just for family, you will have a lot of parties with friends, or is a boat where you are going to live in and do also your business. So that's my point.
This goes back to understanding how people really use their boat. And I think before committing to building a custom one, you need to also search yourself, what exactly is this boat going to be built for? I also think there's another point that needs to be brought up, that is, at least in my experience, there's not 2 shipyards in the world, even if they are literally 50 meters one from the other, that build boats alike. Of course, there's a lot of common ground, but literally every shipyard has their own specific way of getting to the end point, and some prioritize certain approaches, some others. I've recently come across a client for a very big boat and a very important person, so someone that knows what they're speaking about, who asked me very directly, kind of put me in the spotlight, and not in a good one with that question, asked me what would be his best choice between building a certain boat with a very prominent Italian shipyard and a very prominent German shipyard. And you know, the usual reply you would expect is, well, you go Germany if you want a certain type of quality and and approach to shipbuilding. You go Italy if you want more flexibility, blah, 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 the flair, the design. It's partially true, but the bottom line is there's not a better boat and a worse boat. There can be from time to time, but it's much more something that belongs to a cultural difference of how the product is conceived and what scope the product serves. So you would need to also talk and charter boats from different shipyards and build in different areas of the world to also understand the culture that's behind that way of building, which is very similar to for example, civil architecture. I mean, the way they build houses in the USA is completely different and almost inconceivable for us Europeans, but yet they are absolutely perfect for that market. And the same happens with yachts. So you really want to know who you are, what are you talking about when you talk about a German boat, a Dutch boat, an Italian boat from a particular area of Italy, or an Italian boat from another area of Italy. These things are so complex and there's so many people contributing to how they're built that really makes a lot of difference. And it pertains to your perception and your culture to see what's more fit for what you're looking for.
I was waiting to see if Immo and Tim were going to add anything to that. Well, I guess we've touched on so many different things for people to bear in mind. What is, you know, I'm going to build my own boat tomorrow. I'm going to commission my dream yacht. What's the one thing, one piece of advice that you would give me?
Enjoy it.
Very wise words, I'd say.
Are you really sure you want to do this?
The other one, choose a designer with whom you can also enjoy these few years experience, because as we were saying, when the designer choice is not just which style the design is expert or is creating, but the owner has really to feel that the relationship with the designer is going to go well, I mean, and enjoy the full process, because it has ups and downs, as we said, as every project. So it's important to have a good feeling on this.
Well, I think a long-term relationship in the end. Can I take on what Laura was saying? I would say choose the right people for everyone in your team, not just the designer.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because it's going to be your designer, but that needs to merge with your team of project managing, the low people, whatever. It's going to be a process that involves many professionals. And if I can say, for God's sake, don't choose to work with prima donnas. Extremely charming at the very beginning, but building a boat, it's really a work of so many people that need to work together, and they need to work well. That if you have someone in the team that makes the others feel bad, it's not going to be in the interest of your project. So I think this is actually a wise thing to say, as weird as it can, coming from a designer. As weird as it can.
And of course, before you start, watch this interview first.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's a good place to end things, and I think you would all be wonderful designers to work with, and you can build my dream yacht any day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.